Good morning. My name is Sam. I am an alcoholic and I'm also a son of recovery. Let's start out with the Serenity Prayer. Good and gracious God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Well, it's been a couple weeks. I turned 40. I had my 5th year sobriety. I had my first year wedding anniversary. So I had a lot of things going on. But I am back and I also started a new graduate course. I am getting a degree, my graduate degree too, so it's been very busy. But I'm glad to be back, and I'm looking forward to continuing. So we are still on 12 secular steps, and I'm on chapter 6, which is Reconstruction, steps 4 through 9. And this chapter also is a little bit, so we will probably stop around step 6 or so. Since it's covering so many. But yeah, so chapter 6. Chapter summary. In our one-page inventory for step 1, we wrote down the worst things we could remember that were associated with our drinking and using, and we put the blame squarely on our addiction. It was the right thing to do at the time, but in phase 2, we go deeper into the cause of transgressions in the past. By the time we finish our step 4 inventory, we'll likely conclude, I've met the enemy, and it is me. In step 1 of this phase, step 4 is considered by many to be the most difficult of the 12. It's basically a self-inventory through which we list the moral failings of our past, analyze the results of recurring patterns, and then identify the defects in our character that produce these dysfunctional patterns. If we don't deal with these defects, they will undoubtedly continue to create stress and conflict in our lives, perhaps enough to return us to active addiction. So, our plan is to try and extinguish these defects and instill in their place a set of basic principles and values that can guide us to better choices and outcomes. This takes practice, but with a little diligence on our part, you'll soon handle situations more effectively. People around you will soon notice the change and they'll react positively. This recognition motivates you to keep making improvements on yourself. You may find one day that you're not the same person you were just a few months or a year ago. For me, it happened on a Thursday evening. I had a little over a year sobriety at the time. As I joined my home group friends for our usual after the meeting dinner, and in the middle of the meal, I realized I had changed. I knew this because I was happy, and in that moment, grateful. And it had been a long time since I felt like that day to day. I remember an experience like that. It was in my first, maybe it was just after 90 days, but it was somewhere around there. I was at a meeting. It was after the meeting, and I was just hanging out with my friend Allison. I forget what she said, but I started laughing so hard, and then I started crying. And she was not sure what to do. She didn't know how to react. She was like, oh my God, are you okay? And I was still kind of laughing, but I was like, I just realized in that second, I had not laughed like that full body laugh in a very long time. And it felt so good. And I was just crying because I was happy. And I remember that feeling. So if you've had one of those feelings, let us know. Step 4, some guidelines for step 4. The best piece of advice I have for working step 4 and all of phase 2 is to be goal-oriented throughout the process. Think of this inventory as a clinical procedure through which we examine our past, diagnose specific defects of character, and then remove or neutralize them. Look, we've got to cut through the skin and surface layers to get to our real inner workings. And if you're doing a good job with this, the inventory will likely make you experience some embarrassment, fear, shame, anger, and even despair. Take a break if gathering these facts trigger or worsen depression, post-traumatic stress, hopelessness, resentment, or restlessness, relentless bad memories that constantly repeat themselves. Be a conscientious time traveler and return home to the here and now often. As one of my favorite authors, Toni Morrison, wrote in the book Beloved, there is a quote that says, dead things coming back to life are going to hurt. One of the characters says that to another, and that is very true. when we are coming back to life through sobriety, there is a lot of pain, and especially with your fourth step. And he is very right. Take a break, gather in these, and if you're doing a good job, the inventory will likely make you experience some embarrassment, fear, shame, anger, and even despair. And that is very true. You will be feeling those things. And if that gets too much, just take a break. Talk to your sponsor for a little bit. Talk to a friend. Just take some time and just go for a walk and be in the day and the beautiful fall weather. So I'll continue now. The second best piece of advice I have is to not isolate yourself during this phase of recovery. If you aren't part of a social group, even just 2 or 3 people with whom you interact on a regular basis inside and outside of meetings, you may not be ready for this phase yet. Social groups among your peers in the fellowship is where much of the work of recovery happens. You will hear old-timers stress the importance of the meeting before the meeting and the meeting after the meeting, because those who aren't making meetings or the time spent socializing before and after usually aren't recovering either. The suggestions that follow below may differ dramatically from what someone in your recovery circle would suggest. Don't think twice about putting my suggestions aside to try those of a sponsor or someone working with you. That's what I love about the program. When you know somebody is in the program, you know that they always say, listen, you can take my advice or you can toss it aside. It's totally fine. the 12 steps even say that take what you need and leave behind what doesn't work. But a lot of us have seen that all 12 steps really do work. So, if you are looking for a detailed and systemic Step 4 guide, I recommend one titled Working Step 4 in Narcotics Anonymous. It is an NA Fellowship approved literature and available online or in meetings. I like its contemporary voice and language and the thoroughness of the inventory. And as we all know, we can definitely use NA materials in AA and AA materials in NA. It's all about recovery. Dishonesty. So Step 4, completed a searching and fearless moral inventory of myself. Dishonesty, selfishness, impulsiveness, fear, anger, despair, and jealousy. These are all some or more of the more common defects we are looking for in our problematic patterns of the past. In fact, I would suggest we keep it simple and just stick with this list. In a way, almost all defects can be simplified to self-centeredness. Also, feel free to modify the plan below to fit your needs. If you want to create an inventory that is restricted to wrongdoings involving only immediate family members, and for just the last 3 years, feel free to do that. You can always go through additional rounds of inventory later. That is true. I did many. When I would remember something, I would just write it down. Even after I completed my Step 4 with my sponsor, I would just write it down, and then I would kind of gather those, like, when I would remember something, and then I would take it to Bobby and talk about it with him, like, hey, I remember these different things. I just want to talk about those, because Bobby was my sponsor, so yeah. Okay. One more thing. The founders concluded that one of the most important topics we need to attend to is resentments. From their experience, this was the number one offender in causing relapses. Accordingly, we'll have a section of our inventory that specifically addresses this topic. Remember these defects for later: dishonesty, selfishness, impulsiveness, fear, anger, despair, and jealousy. Make a list of the important people in your life. Let's start out with people who are currently important to you in some way. People you love, those you resent, spouse, children, ex-spouses, parents, lovers, close friends, and relatives, important people at work. Please make a notation if you are currently on speaking terms with this person, but don't skip over them if you aren't. That is very significant. Name people to whom you currently feel an emotional connection, even if they aren't alive. For example, grandparents or other relatives who had a large effect on how your life turned out. It can be either a positive emotional connection or strong resentment. So, here's the list. So, write a draft out of your transgressions first. Write this rough draft in a relaxed way. Don't overthink it or pressure yourself with, am I doing this right? Let it out. Don't get critical about grammar, etc. We just want a flow of words and recollections. Part 2. Write this out in a way that seems to work for you. You can write the wrongs. Those last 3 words are a Step 9 pun. to time, the last 6 months, year, then 5 years, etc. And then later match them up to a person. Or you start by person and list transgressions. Eventually, we will want to match your significant people with the wrongs you've done to them in the past. Include items from your first step inventory if you still have it. Number 3. Put the emphasis on significant wrongs. Get to transgressions you feel are worthy of accounting for and that warrant change in your character. Here are some cues: threats, violence, lies, theft, wrongs involving control or emotional forcefulness, wrongs involving intimacy and sex, wrongs involving not being there, wrongs involving responsibilities you didn't live up to, wrongs involving money, significant wrongs involving vicious gossip about someone, truthful or not, wrongs involving hurtful things you did or said to them, whether you feel it was justified or not. And number 4, write next to the wrong a defect or two you feel applies to it. Fear is a tricky one. Often people lie because they fear the reactions of others if they tell the truth, for instance. So lying can be dishonesty and fear. Control of others is often related to both selfishness and the fear of not getting outcomes you want. Maybe you have lied recently in order to manipulate someone close to you for money. That would be both dishonest and selfish. So now we're going to write down your resentments. Number 1. This is a separate section. Write down resentments you have against people and life circumstances. Look over your significant people and cover resentments against these folks first. The first resentments to list are the ones with the most emotional impact to you now. Get significant ones from the deep past too, such as resentments against your parents and other adults for things they did or failed to do while you were growing up. So next, we're going to write down your strengths, positive values, and some good things that you've done. Because, as Bobby taught me, you are also full of good things too. You are a good person, so you need to remember that as well. Everyone has these. Everyone has these. Write these down. They don't have to be big items. They just need to show some good in you. This is just about to balance things out and to keep a healthy perspective. If this is difficult, remember that self-esteem is commonly low for everyone in early recovery, and that is true. And that working this phase will improve it. So now we're going to rewrite and reorganize the transgressions inventory. I suggest rewriting and reorganizing that significant transgressions are matched with significant people, and that you assign 1 or 2 defects to these transgressions. The associations of people to transgressions to defects make them real. Your actions affected not only you, but also the people around you. Defects are like leaks in the boat. We spend a lot of effort on bailing out water in our dysfunctional lives, but fixing the leak is better. This organizational scheme has a nice added benefit. You'll probably be more than halfway done with your Step 8 inventory when you finish. Add a section for significant wrongdoings that didn't fit above or match with people on your list. This might include wrongs committed against strangers, animals, organizations, etc. This is a catch-all category. Be honest and just keep the facts. Remove justifications, perceptions, and rationalizations. Now add the transgressions you didn't want to put down or share with anyone ever. These are the ones you would be worried about while St. Peter does the math at Heaven's Gate. Yes, the very scary big transgressions, should you have any, write them down, and you will share them once with one person, like your sponsor or someone, and then burn them and let them go. And let that be that. Analyze the transgressions inventory. What general conclusions can you draw from this inventory? Which of these transgressions can be attributed to being high or impulsive or selfish or angry or passive-aggressive? What outcomes and people do you try to control with lies, aggression, emotional manipulation? Overall, do you take more than you can give to others? Can you list a few problem areas you need to work on? Are you willing to keep a journal on your progress with these? Do people have value to you only to the context that they are useful to you? Are you honest with yourself and others? Prepare to share this inventory, especially the analysis above. Analyze the resentments inventory. The word resentment implies a bitterness at being mistreated. Its literal meaning is to re-experience emotionally. Resentiment, or emotion. Resentments focus on feelings, just like addiction does, and they occur over and over, just like addiction does. They take us out of the here and now and into a fantasy world of the past, where they change how we feel. That's not a good pattern. So we should try to resolve or neutralize resentments and break their hold on us. Here are some suggestions for dealing with them. Look for your part, take responsibility, and move on. AA and NA have long advised that we look for our part when examining our resentments. We should own up to our contribution to the wreckage and identify bad choices or where we acted impulsively or emotionally and created situations where people struck back with their actions and words. Honesty often changes the story. Keep the facts, trace back, and look at choices you made that affected or caused the situation and the outcome. Another aspect is, can I take action to resolve this resentment? Honest and calm communication with the other person often resolves resentments. If you've never talked to that person about having this resentment, consider doing so. In the future, especially if your style is to hold on to resentments in silence, talk to the person while the issue is new. This is especially a good idea if, in a moment of honest reflection, you think the person's actions and words were not really an attempt to do deliberate evil to you. Perhaps they just didn't think through the consequences. Talk to them when you are calm and able to listen to their side objectively. Stop personalizing the actions of others. We often personalize a situation or event and rewrite the facts into a story that our role is clearly that of a victim. Did someone fire you because their purpose in life was to get you, or did you fail to do your job? Did you steal from them, or were you frequently high, hungover, or calling in sick? If you are honest about the resentment and look at the facts, did the offender have it in for you personally, or were you at the wrong place at the wrong time? Is the offender mentally ill or psychologically unsound? Through twisted perceptions, have you made enemies in your head that don't really exist in the reality of facts? Neutralizing resentments. Stop playing the tape. Consciously work on letting go. Starving the hatred and bitterness that playing that tape over and over keeps alive. Don't feed it time, attention, or emotion. Tag your resentment by associating it with a short verbal tag that mentally pops up every time the resentment tape plays in your head. The tag reminds you to stop the tape and return to the here and now. Maybe you hate the person who wronged you unjustly. Why let a person you hate continuously steal the most valuable gift life will ever send your way? Time. When you become aware of your resentment tape playing, the associated tag automatically comes to mind. So and so doesn't get to steal today from me. When you hear that tag, go do something else. Make every effort to stay in the here and now. This is a lot like dealing with cravings. They will pass and they will lessen over time. Justified resentments. We resist, even fear, letting go of a resentment we feel is justified. We do nothing wrong. We were innocent or clearly undeserving victims. Justified resentments are real and they are common. This world is very cruel, even to children. With these resentments, we become obsessed with justice, and if that, revenge. How can we let this obsession, this hope for justice and revenge, die? The answer is either by action or by letting acceptance take the place of that hope. We can act towards justice. Do so if it doesn't harm you or others you care about. If your actions break the law or society's norms, work on acceptance. Also, share this burden with someone you trust. If you can find them, share with others who have had a similar experience. This is an action, one that is far less harmful than taking revenge. It's not a weakness to share this experience. It's a courageous way to deal with injustice. If we keep it to ourselves, we may find that the wound is very difficult to heal with time. Regrets. Spending time regretting self-centered behavior is itself self-centered. Spend time constructively. Also, gratitude for what we have is far better than regret for what we don't. If I could go back and change anything in my childhood, it could very well be that I would go back and give myself an enduring gratitude for what I have. That is the truth. This is the last piece of step 4. Last piece of advice in resentments. I have a word of warning about 2 unofficial, yet in some groups common 12-step practices I disagree with, and these are the philosophy that you are powerless and that these things that happen to you are part of God's plan. The practice of having victims of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse prey on their abusers. If you have abuse like this in your inventory, I would encourage you to ask the person you are potentially working with on steps 4 and 5 for their views on these practices and make sure they match yours. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I was just rereading that. In the practice of having victims of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse pray for their abusers. So, here's my feeling on that. It's really up to the person. And I would not, if I was sponsoring someone who is a victim of physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, I would just let them talk about it to me. I would not encourage them to pray for that person or anything. I wouldn't discourage it, but I would let it come up for them. It's got to be a thing because it will happen. If they are doing the work, if they are putting it in, it will come at some point, and maybe not even within a year or two. It might be like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 years till they can get to the point where they can forgive and let go of, or maybe not. And you know what? That's okay. As far as I know, I'm not a victim of any sexual abuse that I'm aware of, so I can't speak into that. Emotional, physical abuse, maybe. Some stuff happened, but nothing I'm really holding on to very much. I've talked about it with a lot of people. So with that, we will move on to the next part of this chapter is go to step 5. So we'll move on to that later. And let's get a prayer. This is a good one. Lord, I'm grateful that when I get to the bottom and there is nothing left but you, I found you were enough. My surrender and growing spirituality grant me serenity when surrounded with turmoil. I have an active concern for the well-being of other people. My spiritual growth has helped me through my attitudes and actions to better live with myself, you, and others. As always, if you have any thoughts, questions, or comments, please leave them. And I hope you all have a blessed day. Thank you.